Hey, welcome to Slot Carcast number 37. What we're going to do today is take a look at some race coordinator setup, how to make it easier for your end users, the guys that aren't technical, that don't use spreadsheets on a daily basis, how they can look at the data and get information from your race that you just had. So in this setup here of race coordinator, if you own race coordinator, you've probably messed around with it. What I've done here is this is a slow to fast test race. And what I'm doing is I'm having all the slow drivers will be grouped in the first heat. Then the medium drivers will be in the next heat. And then the top fastest drivers will be in the third heat. And then it'll rotate back to the slow drivers, medium, fast, slow, medium, fast. So everybody will go on every single lane, but you'll kind of be grouped with people that are similar to your level of driving. This One of the things in our club is that there's a few people that have complained they don't like to drive with the slower drivers who take them out all the time. And it kind of like if you're stuck with the slower drivers and you're one of the fastest drivers, but the fastest drivers are all stuck with just one slow driver, those three guys that are racing the faster heats definitely have an advantage because the track won't stop as often. You can pass without worry. I understand their point, but on the other side, we kind of like all race together because you don't want empty lanes. In this scenario here, I'm going to say that I have a 4-lane track, which I do, and then we're going to say 5 people show up. Now, if I don't add these dummy drivers in, I'm going to wind up driving my heats alone because it's going to say the slowest driver is Jeremy, and then the top 4 drivers will be racing all together. So that would be kind of weird too. So what I'll do is I'll move one of these dummy drivers in here and make him, I can put him in anywhere as long as he's in the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, these will be considered the top drivers. Now these 2 bottom drivers here will be racing together. Let's see. Did I move that? There you go. So Jeremy and Russ, these are our fictional characters. Well, I guess I am Jeremy. All right, anyway. These fictional drivers will be racing together. And these dummy drivers, I'm going to put this on a demo mode. If it was a real race, the dummy lanes just sit there and they're not used, and these 2 get to race together, and then these 3 get to race together. Now, obviously, you'd like to have 8 people show up because then there would be no empty lanes, and everybody would race. It wouldn't be a problem. And maybe instead of 5 drivers, 6 drivers show up, so you get rid of a dummy driver and you put in a real driver here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the race in a demo mode. I'm not going to make you sit through the whole race. I'll pause it. We'll come back and we'll look at the results. Okay, so race is over. We have our results. We can see first place was Bruce Jeremy, dummy. Now, obviously, if the dummy wasn't racing, these would be at the bottom, and you'd have the actual results. Now, when the race ends, you always get this checker flag, and when you close out of it, it'll say ratio, you want to end the race. Once you see the checkered flags and end the race, it's going to save it to your database. Now, at this point, I would just go to export the race, but I'm going to show you how to get your results later. In case you forget to do this, you can still pull them up. So I'm going to close this. Yes, I want to end the race. Okay, so I've ended the race, and I was like, oh, I didn't get my spreadsheet. So I'm going to load a race event, and that was this folder, program data, x86, race coordinator stats. This was a test race here. And today I did this race. Now, if you've done a dozen races, you'll see a dozen stats here. You can just sort by the date it was modified to get your most recent results. And in the name of it here, it tells you it's 10/23, 10, say the 23rd. Let me double check. Wow, it is at 10:41 a.m. So I will open this one. And it brings up the screen just like it was at the end of the race. So now I can go, okay, now I can export it. So I'm going to go File, and I'm going to export this race. This is the default template. You shouldn't have to mess with this because this default template just tells it, take all these numbers, put them in this order for a spreadsheet. So just hit export. And then where do you want to place this? I'm going to put this in documents here. Let me think. I'll put it here in slot car. Okay, perfect. So here I'm putting it on a USB thumb drive, and I can take this USB thumb drive to the track, plug it in, pull the data, and then export it later. It would be nice if Race Coordinator at this point would export that to Google Sheets. That would be phenomenal, but unfortunately it doesn't do that. So I've exported that, and let me go see if I can find it on my computer. Should be in here, and here it is. This is, let's see. I'm going to open this with, let me see. There is a free you may have Microsoft Excel installed, just depends on your computer. I'm using LibreOffice because it's free and I'm cheap. So let me open that up. Okay, so this is just a spreadsheet using LibreOffice. The problem that we have in our club as well is like some guys don't have Excel installed. They also don't have LibreOffice, and they don't know how or care to do that. So what I usually do is I will take, yeah, that's in on, okay. I will take in Google Sheets and I will add a new sheet. Oh, maybe. File, import the sheet. Upload, browse, slot car, test. So I'm going to upload that from the USB drive, replace the data because there's nothing in this data right now. So it will update it, and it uploaded just like it was the regular spreadsheet. There shouldn't be any differences in here. And then the great thing, not great thing, but the cool thing about this is I can then share it. IMR test slow, too fast, and on 1023. Save it as the name, and now obviously only I have access to it. Anyone with the link can become a viewer. You don't want them to be an editor because then they can change stuff, but anyone with that link can be a viewer. I'm going to copy the link, done, and I'll put it in an email address and send that to my group. And then when my group gets it, this is a new incognito window here. They're going to get this link right here. This would open it just like somebody who doesn't have a Google account would open it. So let's take a look here. It should look exactly the same. And same file. They can share it with friends, guys who didn't make it to the heat. So now you have this open. You see lane 1 on heat 1. Russ, a dummy lane. Jeremy, a dummy lane. Hey, 3 dummies. Hey, how dare me? How dare you? All right. Heat 2 was Jim, Dwight, a dummy, and Bruce. You can see every heat here. Now, that doesn't tell you much. What you want to do is come down here to overall. Overall is where you get 90% of your information. You'll see, because this is a new race I started, all these records will be from this last race. These will change over time. The lap record is 4.096. The computer generated that, but 6 weeks from now, when we've raced 6 times, that record's going to change. But this record will be forever as long as you don't rename that or change that race or copy it, or as long as you race the same cars. Like this is a test race, obviously, but if it was like our GT class, all the GT cars, you'd know the exact records that were beaten and broken on this. So this tells you right here the position that the race finished in. Remember earlier I showed you Bruce, Jeremy, Dummy, Jimpy, first, second, third, fourth, eighth. This is interesting for seed because what happens is when you have a seeded race, maybe you have a qualifying race and there's like a 3-lap, do your best qualifying, and then that'll set the grid. And the grid starts off maybe here. Dwight he started in 4th place on that grid, but he wound up being 7th place overall. So he kind of went downward. Why that's important is later, if you have, let's say you have 5 races in the day and you start out with a qualifier at the beginning, that seed number sets the next race. So you have a qualifying race, and this would be the end of the qualifying race in this position. So then the next race after the qualifier starts, you'll start with this position. Your seed for the next race will obviously say different things. It will have Bruce is the 1 seed, Jeremy's a 2 seed, and Dummy is 3 seed, 4 seed. So that's what the seed is. It just tells you where you were, expected to finish, but where you actually did finish. In our racing that we're doing now, we're doing some testing. We're trying to do 48 laps total. Whoever does the 48 laps in the quickest amount of time by a tiebreaker is the winner. Your club may do different things. You may race for 2 minutes, and it'll say here, like 2 minutes, you did 48 laps. Your score is based off how many laps you did, just because of the way I set this race up. So that's not really that important. Gives you any information here if we had to adjust any laps, which we don't. I'll cover that in a different video on how to do that. Fastest lap, average lap. So you just get an idea of Bruce's time here. If you click here, it highlights his little thing. His fastest lap was a 4.2. Jeremy's was a 4.21. His average lap, and like I said, in our racing that we're doing, average lap will give you the lead. It sorts it by average lap. How many laps you led the race, that's kind of fun. The entire race is hard to see when you only have 4 drivers on there, but 8 drivers are actually racing. It's hard to see. And then what also is weird about this style of racing is that if you're racing with 4 slow guys, you don't know where you're at, but the 4 faster guys, they've already completed 2 more laps than you. You don't know it. You're leading the race, but you realize you're going at slow guys. So it's kind of hard when you're in that slower bracket on this to keep track of where you are, because you really have to push yourself. But it's hard to when you're winning. You're like, well, why? I'm not going to push myself and wipe out, but it becomes a weird thing. So, and then season points. One of the things we'll cover in a topic later is if we're going to keep track of season points, maybe you give a win, kind of like F1 style. You say win is worth 10 points, second, third, and then if you don't make it into those 10, you don't get no points. We'll cover that in a later episode too. So when I said earlier, like there's 8 guys racing, but there's only 4 on the track at a time, this race leader chart is kind of handy for that, because it gives you kind of an overall feel of how the race went. So here I'm going to say this guy is orange, Russ. He started at the back and he kind of traded a little positions, and then he moved up, and then he kept moving up, then he moved back down. So if the race all happened, if we, instead of having just 4 lanes, if we had 8 lanes, this is kind of what it would look like based on the numbers. And you'll see here, some of the numbers get a little harder to I wish there was like a better way to see this, but there's not. The dummy kind of started in second place, dropped to way down here, came back, took the lead for a little while, and that's why he led a few laps, came back down. So it's just kind of interesting to see if the race was a whole race, how that worked. Now, that's all the information a guy really needs from this. If you want to start digging into stuff just for fun, maybe you started working on your car and you're going to say, okay, on heat 1, reaction time, don't worry about reaction time. Reaction time is if you start this, your car's here and the sensors on your line are here, and she says go, and you take off, that's your reaction time, is how fast you get under that. But a lot of times it doesn't matter unless you're doing maybe like hot starts. If you got a hot start behind the line and you want to see, it's like 4, 3, 2, 1, go, and you want that reaction time to be like right on the money and not break it. Best lap, obviously, that makes sense. On this heat, remember we're on heat 1. Russ had a best lap of 4.3. Dummy had a 4.9. Jeremy had a 4.3. Dummy had a 4.2. That was his best. His average, medium. I mean, all this stuff is kind of information that you could use if you wanted to. So what you would do is say, here, I'm going to use me, Jeremy. I tuned this car, and if I looked at this week, since this is a spreadsheet, I'll always have it until I delete it. And so I can make changes to my car in the next week and see what my times are like. Like if I'm going to look at my average lap time as a 4.9, and I adjust the front axle and I bring the wheels down touching the track, and I for some reason my car has bent a wheel and it's now up, and I look at my average lap time, maybe it's up to 5. I mean, if it goes way off, I'm like, uh-oh, I got to look at it, see what I did. And sometimes you just start tuning, and you know how you start tuning, you're like, man, this car is perfect. If I just get it tuned right, and you tune it, and then the car is never good again. And you're like, oh man. So this is just information if people who don't own a track can look at it and get some information about how their car is doing or how they're doing as a driver. And obviously it's not perfect. I mean, you're going to have bad days, good days. So for this heat, as I showed you earlier, here's how the heat started out. Now, one of the weird things is it puts, on the other sheet too, it puts the top position at 4 instead of 1. You would think you would just reverse this and go 1, 2, 3, 4. But anyway, top position leader starts off here as dummy 3. Quickly, Jeremy takes the lead from him. and then they trade back somewhere mid to late pack. You can count this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So right around the 10th lap, since we did 12 laps here, right around the 12th lap, they traded back and the dummy beat Jeremy, which is not unusual. And then you can just kind of see what happened in that race. And that's the only thing. Each heat that you were in, you would take a look here. It's also going to give you record lap name. Here, Dwight set a 4.2 on orange. Record lap time, the date it happened. So it's just, it's obviously 90% of the people are not ever going to look at this. This is only for people who just like to look at the numbers and are really bored. Let's be honest. Fastest laps. This is obviously fastest laps for the whole thing. If you're just curious to see who was, I mean, if you look at somebody's car and you're like, man, that thing is really fast, and you come over here and you look and you're like, oh yeah, it was really fast. He set the lane. He set a 4.2, a 4.2, 4.2, 4.0, 4.4. So, and then also kind of interesting, I'm really bad in I'm a 4.5, 4.2, 4.3, 4.5. So in the gutter lanes, the orange and red, I'm just not as fast as I am in the green and white. I may want to take a look at that. Like if this is if lane 1 here happens to be the gutter lane, but I'm doing way better than I am on like the inside easier lanes, I may want to take a look at my car and see what's up with that. Why am I be able to get around those corners a little faster? It's all just data, and none of it matters if you just drive by feel. If you don't like to look at data, don't, just skip it. Season, we don't have a season. I didn't set up season. We'll do that in a later position, but one of the nice things could be if you put this information out, you could take a picture of this or a screenshot or something and see, just like an F1, like Max Verstappen would be up here at 1 because he's crushing everybody. But you would see how many races, how many points he has, who the driver is. I mean, in this case, I didn't set up season. And this graph data is nothing that you need to worry about. Don't change any of these numbers. This is just the information that the program needs to put all of this charts together, all of these gaps together. So that is the basics of covering this. I have sent these out to our club to look at. Oh, I'm incognito here. I have sent these out for our last race. Previously, in our old system, one guy would take a picture of it, send it to another guy. The other guy would have to put a spreadsheet together. And he's just mentioned that if we don't need it anymore, he can stop doing these spreadsheets, which I'm sure it takes up a lot of time. But here now the computer just does it all for you. So in our races here, let's take a look at Slotted Classics. Our last Slotted Classics, same thing, was this is the actual heat view, how it got set up. And as I said, this just tells you the heat. It doesn't really give you much. Overall is where you really want to look. The record was set by Russ. Score would be laps, how fast you did. Like in this case, since we all should get 48. In our racing series, if the leader crosses the finish line, everybody gets one lap to finish. And sometimes if you're down 2 laps, if you've been lapped twice, you're not going to get those points. So that's why not everybody is on 48. You're not allowed to finish the whole race. You only get to finish 1 lap. And as you can see in the race here, see, green, Russ was in second. Where did he start as a seed? Russ started as a 3 seed, moved up to 1, and held the lead pretty much the whole race. There was some trading back and forth here between Jeremy and Bruce. Jeremy and Bruce in our club happened to be pretty evenly matched most days, and that's probably why there was some trading back and forth here. Nobody else. There was some trading here for third, or was this 1, 2, 3, fourth, and fifth place. A little bit of trading back and forth until looks like Jim won that one. And then for the bottom, there was a lot of trading and forth back here. One of the things that is fun to look at when you look at this chart, like I've done this myself, I'm in second place, and then all of a sudden I just keep dropping down, 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 and all of a sudden I'm in 6th place. So like, what happened? I can go through and kind of look at the information, like where did it all go wrong for me? And then look at myself, my driving, or the car. Like, is it a certain lap with a certain car that I'm not good at? You know, like I know I'm terrible in GT. So we can take a look at that. I have ignored my GT car and not touched it in probably a year or 2 while I work on other things. That's my excuse. I'm just a bad driver. We all know that. Let's take a look at it. It didn't get the chart displayed quite correctly here. That's what this means. But of course it didn't. Did the heats? The heats didn't get it either. Well, there's a lesson to learn. Sometimes it doesn't quite track that chart correctly. The numbers are still correct, but something in it didn't display properly. Let's try a different one. Okay, so LibreOffice didn't display it correctly. Google Sheets did. So in GT, I know I'm going to be terrible. Where am I at? Blue. I'm way down here. So where did I start my seed? I was the 7th seed, and I moved up to 5th, so that's not bad. I guess I got a little better. I did put some new tires on my car, so glued them, trued them, got them ready. Maybe that was what moved me up a little. But I'm gonna need to keep, obviously, I need to keep practicing. I did get all 48 laps, which is important in our club racing. And let me see my fastest lap here. Jeremy at a 5.8, 5.7, 5.8, 5.7. The red and yellow are considered gutter lanes. They have the red lane has the sharpest turns, but you can get around it faster as long as you're willing to push it. Yellow has a few sharp turns, but I think it's a little longer than red. So it's interesting that I got a better score on the yellow lane. It just that sharp curve. Now I need to start looking at my car and know that it's not going around that sharp curve very fast. Russ is the guy in the club who dominates all of our racing. It's hard to beat him in anything, so good luck with that. So that's it. Look at your heats, see where you were in. I was not in any of these. These. So here, Jeremy started pretty weak. Green. Started in 2nd, dropped to 3rd, came back up, finished in 2nd. So not a bad trade right there. Once you got past him, obviously he passed you at some point, and you passed him back. So that's it. Take a look, play around with it. Once somebody sends you the link in Google Sheets, if you're just viewing it, there's nothing you can do. You can't like change numbers here and make it count. Now, whoops, I guess I can because I'm an editor. But you won't be able to change any of those numbers if you're not an editor on that. Cool. Hope I helped you a little bit understand this. And if not, sorry, you're going to have to do some more investigating on your own. See you.